Hello, I'm Chris Flisher, and welcome to Turning of the Wheel, an intelligent, lively discussion on astrology, art, and adventure. Timing is everything, and as the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed. Join me as I explore the current planetary alignments and offer insights for coping with change. Educational, informative, enlightening, the Turning of the Wheel is a welcome pause in your daily swirl of constant change. Through intelligent discourse, inspired guests, and educational segments, I will help to enlighten your knowledge of astrology and guide you to accept change as the great wheel of life turns. Call in with your questions and speak with some of the greatest visionaries in the time-tested practice of astrology. Turning of the Wheel, Astrology, Art, and Adventure with Chris Flisher, each week on Turning of the Wheel podcast.
Hello and welcome to Turning of the Wheel. My name is Chris Flisher. As you know, this is a show about astrology, art, and spiritual adventure. And in my quest to bring information and knowledge to people, I try to reach out to other practitioners who have ideas and approach the topic of where we are today in the world from a different set of lenses. Numerology is one of those lenses. I think of numerology and astrology as sort of being very much related because they do sort of complement each other along the way. And I got a guest coming on in a few seconds here who's going to be talking about that, an old friend of mine. Before I do that, I want to remind you about my newsletter, which goes out every Sunday afternoon. In there, I'll do a couple of paragraphs of mundane astrology, which takes into account all of us on the planet as a whole, and then I break it out into the individual signs beyond that. I encourage you to sign up for it. It's timely, it's accurate, and people seem to enjoy it, so I get good feedback on it. I think you'll like it too. My podcasts are available at iTunes and many other. Stitcher is also available. Just by any podcast outlet will be carrying my Turning of the Wheel podcast. Just do a Google on that. My website is turningofthewheel.com, then turningofthewheel.tv, or chrisflisher.com as well. So those are all the necessary things I had to get out of the way. And without any further ado, today's guest is Micheal John Fierro. He's a numerologist. I've met him many years ago. We've had a couple of, probably 3 or 4 good conversations on the show here discussing numerology and how numerology and astrology play together. And we're currently looking at what we're looking at. So we're winding down the end of the year 2017. We're coming up on 2018 soon. As astrologers and numerologists alike, we both like to take a longer view of what's going on and what the future might portend. And as we know, we are living in a wild and woolly circus, if ever there was one. So it's a great time to talk about some topics. Welcome to the show, Micheal. It's great to have you on again. Micheal Fierro.
Great to be back, Chris. Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, so we were chatting a little bit before we went on the air here about how things look out there, and it is a very unusual time we're living in. I would have to say it's like nothing we've ever experienced, which in some ways can be very stimulating in an odd sort of way, but it's also very disconcerting when we see what's happening around us. And, you know, we look at through the eyes of the astrologer, we see the longer-term trends happening. We see things leading up into 2024 and 2020 and beyond, and where we see, planets coming in. We see Saturn moving its way in closer into Pluto. We see Jupiter joining Pluto down the road there in 2024. And so I'm just curious from your perspective what you're seeing and how things look through the numerology, and if they sort of jive with what we're seeing in astrology. What do you see coming up for the next year or so?
Well, as you know, everything has kind of 2 sides. There's a positive and negative, whether it's astrology or numerology. There's a positive and negative interpretation of all situations. I go back to 2016 when we had the 9 universal year. And a universal year of 9 or personal years, it's a year of endings. It's a year when you should really get rid of those things that don't serve you or the greater good and find a way to get rid of them and so you have a clean slate upon which to build. We had the unfortunate situation or fortunate, depending, of having the presidential election in 2016. So, the election was held under an ending vibration.
Right, and it certainly played out that way.
Right, and it's one of the reasons I said all along, I didn't think Trump was going to make it all the way through because he began under an ending vibration. And then also there's all these other situations in the country and the world that we have kept hidden. We've allowed them to fester and grow like some fungi in the forest. Yeah. And now what I see is all of this stuff coming to a head. Mm-hmm. All of these issues that the United States and the world have ignored for decades are now coming to the forefront and forcing themselves to be dealt with. And without going global, I'll just look at the United States. Look what's happened over the last few weeks, the Harvey Weinstein thing. So now suddenly sexual harassment, sexual abuse is coming to the forefront. It's
Jupiter
been
and
lying
Scorpio.
underneath
Yep.
the surface.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's now blowing up, and it's forcing us to deal with things. And one of the things in numerology, when you're in a 9 year, again, it's one of the things is you get rid of that which doesn't serve you.
Right.
The codicil to that is if you don't get rid of them and carry them forward into the 1 year, into your next cycle, those conditions exacerbate.
Right.
And what we have seen for the first 10 months of this year, 9.5 months of this year, is all of these things that we didn't deal with are exacerbating and putting themselves into a situation where we have to deal with them.
Yeah. It's untenable. We can't run away any longer.
No, and exactly, but, that's the way of astrology, that's the way of numerology, it's the way of the universe. You need to deal with this stuff. And because, human beings, civilizations, cultures, societies tend to all operate on the same thing. Well, I'm not going to worry about this. I'm not going to worry about it.
Oh, we pass it off. We procrastinate about it. Yeah, we pass it off to the greater collective.
Right. So now we're, whether it's, again, the issue between men and women, the imbalance of power in this country, the inequity, the inequalities, the injustices, all of this stuff is now center stage. And it seems like every day or every week, something else is jumping out onto the stage and say, hey, look at me. You forgot all about me. Now I'm going to make you deal with it.
Yeah.
So we only have a couple of months left in this 1 year. I don't see a lot of progress. There's a lot of talk. There's some recognition that things have to change, but I'm not seeing a lot of forward movement, which leads us now into next year, 2018, which is an 11 universal year. Now, 11 is one of the master numbers, 11, 22, 33, 44, 55. They're master numbers. They're higher callings. They demand more attention. They demand more effort in putting them into action. Mm. So as we enter this 11 year, because master numbers are also teachers, so my sense here as we move into 2018 is the teaching aspect, the need to learn, is really going to amp up. And we are, once again, going to be forced into things where we have to deal with them.
We can no longer kick the can down the road. We can't bury our head in the sand. This is where consequences begin to rise to the surface and force us to make a decision.
Exactly. So, in the realm of the master numbers, the mass shooting in Las Vegas a few weeks ago. Anytime that stuff happens, my first instinct is to do a chart on the person who's doing the shooting.
Right. Same with me. Yep.
So it turns out that the guy who did the shooting in Las Vegas has a 22 life path.
Powerful person.
Okay. And in looking at other situations, the shooting in Orlando, mm-hmm. the shooter had an 11 soul urge. In Newtown.
Yeah. Oh, gosh.
Adam Lanza had an 11 life path, an 11 expression. And Newtown itself had an 11 soul urge, a 22 image, and a 33 expression. Now, I wrote an essay after Newtown focusing on the fact that this is a teaching moment.
Yeah.
So, although, you'd like to look at the benevolent side of something, the positive side of something, after I saw the life path number of the shooter in Las Vegas, I realized that I needed to change my perspective on how I'm looking at the master number involvement here. Now, I did write about the Newtown thing that this was a teaching moment. And what I see now is, again, going back to not handling stuff in the 9 year that needed to be handled and rid of. Now these people are teaching, but they're teaching in the most extreme, violent way. They're forcing us to have a discussion about guns. They're forcing us to have a discussion about gun control and assault weapons. And I sense as we move into 2018, because it will be an 11 universal year, that these lessons are going to become even more dramatic.
I actually think the only way progress really happens is if we get woken up, and we have to be startled in some way because we are so stubborn in that regard. If we don't make moves, we will be told we will be forced to make a move. This is the same thing with climate change.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. So and look at the weather we've had this year.
It's insane.
We ignore it. So Mother Nature says, "Oh yeah, well watch this." And now I read that they now say that the volcano in Yellowstone
any day
could go off much sooner than they anticipated.
I know.
Which will pretty much wipe out the good portion of the North American continent. So as we move into this 11 universal year coming up, two things are also need to be considered. And it's interesting because Trump's life path, or Trump's personal years, are in lockstep with the United States personal years.
Mm-hmm.
So Trump went into a 12-3 personal year at his birthday this year. The United States went into a 12-3 personal year on July 4th. Now next year, this year coming up, the United States and Trump will both enter. Now 2018 is 11 universal year, but the country and our quote-unquote president will both be going into 22 personal years.
It's a master number.
And, the 22 is the master builder. The 22 is the number that creates a new environment and a new world and builds the structures and the foundations for things to grow upon. And since we seem to be in a phase where we're exercising the negative aspect of all of these numbers, I can only wonder what is going to happen as we move forward through 2018. Because I really do believe that the 11 is going to force us to look at things. It's going to force us to become the students and learn the lessons that need to be learned. And if we don't, then they will these things are going to continue to exacerbate more and more and more as we move on down the road.
It's also illustrative of the sort of the pendulum swing that we've witnessed here. We go so far, we find some sort of we feel as if we're okay. We can become placated or passive in some ways until the reality arrives and we are forced to deal with it. That's the situation that we really have to face. I guess we really can't procrastinate any longer, and this is where we'll see these events, and they do reach a certain crescendo, right? I mean, events build on each other until they're unavoidable, and that's where we're standing on the cusp of it. Seems like.
Because it just seems that, procrastination is a good word, avoidance. We have a government, we have legislators, we have half the population that doesn't see problems. They seem to think that everything's okay. I think it was so interesting that, the 60 Minutes thing Sunday night about the opioids.
Yeah. And then here we see the results.
Yeah, and then it forced out the guy that Trump was going to appoint to be the head of the DEA.
Yeah, just insane. I mean that's you can't make that stuff up.
No. And what kind of society do we live in when we're losing, tens of thousands? I think I read today 140 people a day die from opioids.
That's insane. That is absolutely insane. I've known people in my own life who are, friends of my sons who are no longer here.
Right, and somehow our government, and I hold Obama responsible for this too. He signed a bill to make it more difficult to police the drug distributors.
Yeah, it runs very deep. It's a long range, and this is why, no matter who is in charge, we're going to have these situations and these problems. And I understand it's a very complex topic. It's a very big issue. It gets all ensnared with money and politics. There's no question about it. And yet we need a harsh reality wake-up in order to really cope with this effectively. And we're getting that.
Exactly. And the United States had an opportunity on November 8th last year to take a step in the right direction. We didn't. I did on Trump, Clinton, and Sanders.
Right.
Because Trump and based on their life paths, Trump is a 5, Clinton is a 6, Bernie is a 7. And I equated the 5 energy of Trump's life path to the ways of the old, that strong connection to the human condition, not the spiritual, the metaphysical, but the human condition. And I wrote that to vote for Trump, if Trump becomes elected, it will be a step backwards. It will be a sign that we are unwilling or afraid to step forward into the future. I said that Clinton kind of had a foot in the past and a foot in the future. Things wouldn't have improved greatly, but they would have started to change.
Well, we would have had status quo, nothing else. So things would have stayed in place as they were, and that's may or may not have been the right approach either. I understand that, yeah.
Right, but at least, there would have been a female energy, which would have changed some things.
And long overdue.
And to me, Bernie, and to me, Bernie with the 7 life path was a look at the future. This is, more of a, it can be a little idealistic, but it was also all-encompassing, that we're all in this together. We all need to take care of one another. We all need to be cared for and make sure that we don't have to worry.
It's about relationship, and there was a vision there that even though if it may have been unattainable in some regards, still was worth aiming for, if nothing else. And now we've just totally gone the opposite direction.
Exactly. We dove headfirst into the past. The old Fire Sign Theater, forward into the past.
Into the past, exactly, right. Exactly. Charge on, into the
past. So that's what we did. So now we're stuck, and now we have to claw our way out of the deep cesspool that we've been living in all along. In fact, we dove a little deeper to the bottom.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, I think that it's also ignited. Oh shit! My dog just took off. It also ignited a storm of protest and a storm of resistance, and it's time for people to wake up and get their acts together, and that's what's happened. It's galvanized people into taking action.
Yeah.
So we will see how far that goes. One of the things I propose is a national strike.
That would be the best, most effective way.
We need a national strike of women, and we need a national strike of gay people.
Yeah. Anybody who's oppressed at this point in time has to strike at some point in time. That's a very difficult thing to maneuver, and I think that the part of the problem is that we are far more distracted than we've ever been before. So it's difficult for us to get cohesion around this. It's difficult for us to get that sense of unity because we don't have the connection we used to have. We are, in some ways, a product of our own demise because we are sort of looking at a picture that is not accurate of our own personal lives, and we're trying to resolve it for the greater good, and it's too complex. We've gone, in many ways, social media does serve a valuable purpose. It serves to bring people together that wouldn't ordinarily be together, and it's great for connecting with old friends. I would agree with that, all those, but it has also put in place a false front from which we are having a difficult time trying to extricate ourselves, and that's where we think we're sitting right now.
Right, and it's also created a mechanism for great untruth to be dispersed to a wide audience.
I read something the other day where they are now able to. I read this. I saw something in a technical paper the other day about how they're able to take anybody and make their and put words into their mouth literally and have their mouths move as if they're actually saying it. This is going to be done digitally by altering the person. So they actually did the example of showing President George W. Bush saying something he never said, and it looked completely plausible. So this will even crank up the idea of fakeness and falsity and the ambiguity of uncertainty even more so. It's going to just crank it up completely higher if that gets out there. And now you can just envision what Hollywood or anybody who's creative can do with that. The ability for anybody to manipulate imagery is phenomenal, and the fear there is finding the truth ultimately in all this. This is what the big challenge is going to be going forward, is finding the truth and adhering to it.
Right, but to find the truth is kind of a group effort. I mean, everyone needs to be involved, and in my perspective, there's just far too many people too willing to accept whatever they're told as the gospel. And they don't, I mean, if you're on Facebook and you come across a story, how difficult is it to open a new window?
Right.
And run a check on that story to see if it's true.
Right.
And then people get offended when you call them on it.
Well, they're very tied to their ideologues. They're very tied to their their values and what they think is right and what's wrong. And a lot of this springs from this greater malcontent people have, especially they always point to the male, like you. They always point to us, you and I, sort of the white middle class worker who is bitter. I would say I'm bitter, but I'm not respecting it. I'm not playing it out in that regard. If anything, I think I take personal responsibility for my situation and where I am or where we all are. We have to find ways amongst ourselves to solve these problems, as opposed to putting it off on the government. So there is an inequality, but I think people are aiming their anger at the wrong places. That's part of the problem, as far as I can see.
Yeah, and because through manipulation, people have effectively and successfully turned people against one another.
Right. It's this division that's the
because
real problem.
The common themes you hear is, well, when I travel across the country, I don't hear this dialogue. Which is interesting. So, in addition to kind of backing off of Facebook, I also stopped watching the news.
Yeah.
The MSNBC or the CNN. I'm just tired of. What makes you an expert? Your willingness to go on TV and tell people what you're thinking?
Well, I mean, I guess it's just a matter of throwing opinions out there. I mean, there are some people who have been around long enough that we can respect, but there's no Walter Cronkite out there anymore for that part. Someone who could, and there's no sense of, there's no arbiter of the truth. That's the biggest problem, because everything can be manipulated. That's part of the demise of the digital age in some ways.
Right, and it could be the complete downfall of us all, because when you have a country like, whether it's Russia or North Korea or anyone else who has a nefarious mindset, and they've learned how to do that manipulation, well, then you're at the mercy of them. And again, a lot of it goes back to a lack of intellectual curiosity, too much of a willingness to accept whatever you're told as being the gospel truth. Mm-hmm. And then, defending it to the death, which is even more bizarre to me.
Well, there's an intellectual laziness, I would call it, in some ways, where people don't want to delve further than that. It's much easier to be a blind follower. You know that for sure. I mean, that's part of the basis of some of the, if you follow blindly, you will follow anything. There's nothing worse than a blind follower. There's no reason to question. There's no reason to stop and think about what you're doing. And that's where it's easier that way. It doesn't require any emphasis on the individual or ownership on the individual part to stretch further and ask further. That's where the real challenge comes in, but that's where growth comes from as well.
Right. And so we can only pray that moving forward, because again, the 11 is the teacher, that the lessons that come up are positive and beneficial and conscious. But sadly, I also believe that these lessons are going to be taught in perhaps the most difficult and perhaps horrifying way, because, again, we're just not getting it.
No.
How anybody, after 3 hurricanes like we just had in a row.
2 earthquakes back to back.
2 earthquakes, and how people, and at the same time that Texas got 50 inches of rain, in India they got 100.
I know.
But we didn't hear about it, really.
Of course, we don't hear about it here. No, we never do. We only hear. That's part of the problem too, as well. Of course, there's always this select idea of where's the news coming from, who's generating it, what's going on, all that. It is a problem. There's no question about it, because there's so much chatter. I mean, I become overwhelmed by the chatter, and of course then it ripples through the society. And of course we have a person at the top of the whole damn show generating more chatter than anybody else, just out of nature, for the distraction factor. That in itself is what drives the dialogue. There's no sense of,
and has absolutely no compunction about lying.
Of none whatsoever. This is
blatantly lying,
Yes,
and then acting like it was, like yesterday. Oh, none of this is my fault. Well, whose hell's fault is it then?
It's all fake. If it's all fake, somebody had to start it somewhere, and we know where it starts. And the idea, that this is by virtue of the generator of the fake news is calling it all fake news. but that's where it all began. I don't recall hearing this term prior to this election. Do you? I mean, it may have been out there once in a while, but never the way it is now.
Right, and actually, he is the ultimate example.
Yeah, exactly.
Of transference.
Exactly.
Everything he accuses someone else of doing is something that he himself does.
Exactly. Yeah.
All of the accusations he made against Hillary was, in essence, him telling us what he's doing.
Yes, and that couldn't be more accurate. That's exactly what he did. That was it to a T.
But sadly, the dislike factor for her was she was there. I'm not a fan of hers. I think she was qualified, but she's just not a person who people connect with.
No, there wasn't the dialogue and the sort of the rhetoric she chose was a bit snobby, and she sort of looked down at others, and I think that people got a bad taste in their mouth about that, and that was just really what did it. It's unfortunate because I think ultimately she probably is far more, well, we know she's far more qualified than anybody else was, and it's kind of a shock that we got this, but this is kind of what we need. I almost feel as if we hadn't had this happen, maybe we would never have moved. We would have become too complacent. I mean, that's sort of, I suppose you could say it's a rationale, and that's probably exactly what I'm doing is rationalizing. But that's okay. I mean, I think that maybe we needed this wake-up moment. I don't know. We're talking today with Mike.
I believe we did. I believe we do. Again, I equate it to the alcoholic. The alcoholic doesn't get help until he has hit absolute, flat-out rock bottom.
Yeah,
and can go no lower. And then at that point in time, he reaches out and says, help me, and I am willing to accept your help.
Right.
And that's where America is. We have been sliding down this partisan ideological slope where everybody is taken aside. And, under the harsh analysis of daylight, most of what is proposed by the party in control right now is not workable. It's totally demeaning to people. It's disenfranchising, and you can say they can't get anything done.
They can't. They're frozen in deadlock, and this is where serious underlying terms like term limits, for example, would be useful. They would be able to shake up this circus a lot more frequently. Those are things that they should look into. But they are also in charge of. They're the ones who would vote that in, not us. It never comes to a general referendum where we would say, "Do we want this or not?" It always has to go through some very long, complicated process. So that's one of the roadblocks we have. I'm talking today with Micheal John Fierro. His website is just that, Micheal John Fierro, FIERRO.com. He's a numerologist. We've been talking about the numerology of the times and sort of taking a glance about what the world looks like here, trying to figure out, get some answers and see if there's some validation for where we are. And we actually can see it is supported by the numbers. And we'll continue our discussion in a few minutes. So hang in there. I'll be back in a few seconds. Okay.
What is your destiny? Where are you going? What is your real purpose? Do you know? Do you want to know? Of course you do. It's your duty to yourself. We are all here for a reason, and we all have great potential. Discover all of this and more with a professional astrology reading. My name is Chris Flisher, and I can help you. Discover your strengths and work on your weaknesses, and live your life to its fullest capacity. Based on your birthday, birthplace, and birth time, an authentic astrology reading will allow you to live your life to the fullest and reveal your true purpose. Only real astrology can give you real information. It is your destiny, and it is your path. Write me at chris@chrisflisher.com and book a reading today, or call me at 978-393-1036. That's 978-393-1036. www.chrisflisher.com.
Astrology is the science of spirit, and it can serve as an invaluable aid in making the difficult choices in life and seeking truth in all the directions we choose. It holds the potential to allow each of us to evolve to our highest potential. It is the logic of the universe, the code of existence, and the pathway to true wisdom. It is our duty to draw from it the instructions for our lives and to live them to our fullest potential. As the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed.
As the world shrinks and our barriers come down, diverse cultures are striving for harmony, balance, and peace. To ease the transition, we need to expand with color, light, and tolerance. Now, you can become a global citizen and embrace the color and clear spirit with the divine artwork of the mandala. Mandalas are a timeless artistic offering for creating unity, harmony, and peace. My name is Chris Flisher, and I've spent years creating mandalas, and they are now available online at www.turningofthewheel.com. Come and experience the world of color, form, and function with t-shirts, coffee mugs, note cards, and limited edition prints. These vibrant, lively paintings and products express optimism, oneness, and spiritual balance for all who use them. www.turningofthewheel.com. That's www.turningofthewheel.com. And enter a world of possibility and color.
Okay, welcome back to Turning the Wheel. My guest today is Micheal John Fierro. He's a numerologist. You can find him on Facebook. His website is Micheal John Fierro, Fierro.com. MichealJohnFierro.com is his website. He is a fantastic numerologist, and will do a lot of, and as you know, astrology and numerology are very closely related. They support each other, and they pan out exactly as they should. When we're talking about master numbers, you'd mentioned this earlier, Micheal. You know, I think of a master number as being a sort of a heavier hitter, a more potent representation of a number, a very powerful number. And in that potential, there is, and I'm curious to what your take is on this, is the potential for good as equal as it is for bad in that potentially, powerful number placement?
Yes, without a doubt.
So the potential,
and as I alluded to with the mass shootings, all of those master numbers that were involved with the events or the locations, the master numbers are teachers, and we all know if somebody's not listening to you when you're speaking calmly and rationally, sometimes you have to go to the opposite to get their attention. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's what's happening. And as I said, moving into the next year, which is an 11 universal year, the positive aspects of that are wonderful. It would be an increase in spiritual movements. It would be an increase in, greater understanding of metaphysics and occultism and all those other things. There would be great developments in teaching methods and improvements in psychological things. Spiritual teachers will certainly appear. There would be certainly an increase in social conscience. A more altruistic feeling may be prevalent. And there would be scientific developments and innovations and great new inventions. All of those things are very positive and would certainly help to improve the situation. But the negative side of that is political, economic, and spiritual fanaticism.
Yeah, so it goes the other extreme.
Right. And then it can also be coupled with complacency and a smugness, which would be very prevalent in institutions of great power, governments, different segments of our government. Because, in the United States, one of the things we're going to have to really watch is the Supreme Court.
Yeah, that's a tough one, boy. There's so much writing there, yeah.
They could, right, and they can certainly remake the country. And the number of conservative judges that are being appointed to lower courts, it's all going to have an effect on things. And
there's a ripple effect there.
Yeah, without a doubt. So,
and starting in the lower courts is the way to do it. You start in the lower courts in the local municipalities, and you elicit change there. And then that ripples its way all the way up. That's been a long-standing strategy for the party in charge.
Right, and it's also how like the anti-abortion fight. They kind of cherry pick the district court where they know they will get a favorable ruling. Mm-hmm. And no matter what the topic may be, abortion or anything else, they go to the kind of the home ballpark, if to use an analogy,
right,
where they know that their chances of winning are greater, and that way they can force it, and then the decision gets appealed, and eventually it makes its way to the Supreme Court. So, it's incumbent upon each and every individual to rise up and raise their voices and say, to quote Howard Beale, we're mad as hell and we're not going to take it anymore.
Yeah, I agree with that. I see the logic in that. I'm not sure it's attainable at this point in time because, well, in many ways, what Facebook has done, and social media in general, has made everybody their own brand. And when you have that much competition and that much chatter going on, we don't know which brand is better than the other because there's too many things to choose from. It's like walking into a warehouse where they've got thousands and thousands of products, and it's all you don't even know where to begin, what to look at. There's just so much to choose from. And I think that's part of the problem. Until we can get somebody who can rise up from that and with a brand that's palatable and logical for our way forward, we're going to be, swirling around this mess for a while, I think, unfortunately.
Yeah. And again, it's, I always look at elections. And quite frankly, I think everyone who's in office now needs to be voted out. Everyone. I don't care who they are. They need to go home.
Well, I think term limits would help, yeah.
At 84 years old is running for the Senate again. Are you kidding me?
I don't understand.
And that's to me part of the problem with the Democratic Party. Yeah, there's some progressive leaders, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, but they're old.
Yeah. There really
needs
to be some fresh blood in there. And I'm not sure. I guess I'm not sure what the logic is, but I don't understand why someone that old would want to be there. I would think they'd want to retire and get back to, having some fun in their lives. But I guess power is a seductive narcotic, and that's probably what's driving them on. I think they ultimately want to do something good, but damn, it's sure taking their time. What do you see when you look at the longer picture, Mike, when you look at, say, 2020, 2024 through the eyes of numerology? I know how it pans out for astrology. How do you see it in the coming years as we evolve? Because I do think we're hitting I think everything, as we know, you and I both had this discussion, we live in a cyclical world, and these cycles do recur. And it appears as if we're coming up to a point in time, astrologically speaking at least, when we are going to see a great collapse. I think it could be a financial collapse, it could be an infrastructure collapse, it could be something that's wrought to us from the outside. I'm not trying to be an alarmist here. This is just what it looks like from the outside. And I'm curious if you still see that same sort of, same sort of trends unfolding through your eyes from that perspective.
Sadly, yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
2020 would be a 4 universal year. Now, a 4, there's a lot of very positive stuff attached to a 4. It's the ability to create organization and foundations for strength and movement forward. It gives you a good foundation to build off of. 4 is a very metaphysical and spiritual thing. It's the 4 directions. It's the 4 winds. It's the 4 elements. It's all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But the negative side of the 4 is great restriction. Many times a 4, can represent it can represent actually being, but it can also represent the analogy of being in jail.
Okay, interesting.
Where restrictions are so great that we are virtually prisoners in our own lives and in our own country. So, again, it's all got positive and negative aspects. I think a lot will be determined by what happens in this year coming up. If we don't make that turn to create something better, then I think that we are going to, again, be the alcoholic. We are going to be living under a bridge in a cardboard box with just a total sense of desperation and no sense of anything ever getting any better in our lives. That being said, I think that there will be an epiphany moment also. Something is going to happen.
Well, if we had a volcano that blew away half of North America, that might be something that wakes us up. It's interesting. I do believe that there's a unifying quality to this in a strange way. If the Earth and Mother Nature does come back at us, as it has been lately, forcing us to, first of all, how are we going to pay for all this as well as give a tax break to the rich? I mean, that's beyond repair as far as I can see.
Right.
Where the money comes from, I have no idea. But if this affects, and this is affecting all parts of the globe, if we can see this as our natural adversary, for lack of a better word, our natural challenge, I would say, our collective challenge, we would all rise up together and seize this as a moment. But it has to reach a point where it's untenable for us, where we have to make a choice. We have no choice but to move on this. That is where I could see that happening. And if that might be a natural event, might be what brings it about.
Well, just look at the hurricanes and the flooding. Okay, people deny climate change. They deny anything's happening. And we haven't created infrastructure to protect us. And the infrastructure we have is dated and outmoded and derelict and, not worth much. Mm-hmm. So what happens? We get a storm that suddenly forces people, wow, we better do something in case this happens again. Louisiana is losing marshland at the rate of a football field an hour.
Wow, an hour.
Okay?
That's through rising waters?
So, yes. And where I live, the ocean is rising more quickly off the coast of New Jersey than it is just about anywhere in the world. They say that in Atlantic City, which is 45 miles south of where I am, I forget what the date is, maybe 10 years or so, that the ocean will come up another foot.
Wow.
And I can see it. I can see it in the bay. I can see it in the river. I can see it in the ocean. We just went through a process here, $1 million a mile to replenish beaches. They did it in May, and it already needs to be redone.
Yeah, so that's just throwing good money after bad. There's nothing going to come of it.
Right. So people are, I think, eventually going to realize the fires. Is there a part of this country that hasn't had some sort of a natural disaster in the last couple of years? Whether it's tornadoes or fires or hurricanes or
earthquakes
or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think we're going to have, as bad as it may be now, my sense here is it's going to get a little rougher before it gets any better.
Well, yeah, I do see that as well. I think we're going to be headed towards a major corrective moment where we can no longer ignore this. I think that's part of the problem I see with the whole distraction factor is that this is a driving distractor. There's a driving distractor out there that is sort of taking our eyes off the ball, and this is what concerns me. Even some of the stuff that happens in the, some of the things that seem so trivial and inconsequential, these stunts that get pulled out or tweets that get sent out, really just throw us way off the track. And I'm not quite sure how we overcome that. I know how you do it on an individual level, but how you do it on a collective level. We're uncertain about how we're going.
Well, I think that, the media needs to step up and do their job. The media needs to stop buying into the distraction because... And whether it's by design or happenstance, one of the things that I see happening, and it's easily verifiable, is with all of these distractions that are going on, what's happening behind the scenes, especially when it comes to the environment, they just rolled back a regulation that they are now going to they're going to dig out a 12-mile road in the Alaskan wilderness for somebody to put in a mine. All of the regulations that are being rolled back with the EPA and protecting our national parks and all of our national lands and all of this, no one's paying attention to it because it's not a lead story.
There's not enough flash to it, right? Yeah.
And to me, people need to really, stop looking. It's. I equated Trump to a juggling magician.
Right.
While he's got you watching all the balls up in the air, he's doing some act of legerdemain right in front of your eyes, and you're not noticing it because you're so distracted because he's juggling bright, shiny balls. So it's going to start with the individual. It's a person like you, a person like me, many of the people that we know, doing something about it, but then finding that way to influence enough people to wake up.
Well, it has to impact us on a personal level. That's where it has to. You have to get angry. Part of the reason the war in Vietnam was so contentious and came to an end was because people were losing their sons in the war to a draft, which equalized everything, and that made people get incredibly angry, and they fought back, and there was huge demonstrations that eventually, I think, wound that sad story to an end. And I think that we haven't got a similar situation now because we're not in a situation where, although we are being impacted, I mean, it's just being impacted in a much different way. We're not seeing the boys, we don't have the cameras in the field showing this. I remember when the Bush administration invaded Iraq, they said no cameras of bodies coming home and stuff like that because they wanted to suppress what was actually going on. And yet, if we saw this, if we got the taste of it, we would rise up in anger, I believe. I think, or there would be some sort of action. There has to be a precipitating moment where we gather together to find an appropriate response to shift the direction of this ocean line that's going off the end of the earth, off the flat earth.
But the problem is, that. Now, again, like the whole Colin Kaepernick thing has been totally misconstrued as to something that's anti-flag, anti-America, which is not what it's about. But the person with the loudest voice and the biggest megaphone influences the conversation.
Of course.
We've been in Afghanistan for 16 years, and people don't even give this a second thought.
I know.
And who's signing up for the military? The people who have nothing else in their lives. This is the only opportunity they may have. Okay, I'll join the Army. I'll get a job. When I come out, I can go to college. I can do this. I can do that. But you're cannon fodder is what you are. It was interesting that Ken Burns thing on PBS on Vietnam.
Yeah.
I thought one of the very interesting things was that early on, like in the early 60s, where the number of blacks being killed was so off the charts that it actually forced the military to look at it. And that's when they changed up who was coming into the service.
Well, that was the right thing to do because the poor rural people could not afford to go to college, so they didn't get a college deferment.
Right.
And as a result,
they
or
ended the inner city kids.
Of course, yeah, and that was exactly what it was. It was all, and those are and then when they equalized it by having the draft, they had no exemptions in it. Then that's when traction really began to take off because then people in middle class homes were losing their sons, and they saw that this was not fair. But it took that kind of response.
Quite honestly, I think we should reinstitute the draft.
Well,
at all times. Huh?
I don't, because I've got 3 sons. But
well, I understand that, but the fact is, if everybody has skin in the game, it's what changed Vietnam.
I know that, and I understand that completely. That was my point. But I say, I think there's got to be. I mean, it's unfortunate that's the only way we can get out of it because Afghanistan is an absolute mess. I mean, and no one's ever going to win there. No one has ever won there. History will tell you that is just a place where you just cannot win, and yet we're still there despite all odds.
Right, they defeated the Russians, and the Russians are on their border.
Right,
and they couldn't win.
They couldn't.
It's just but again, Vietnam, the French couldn't win. No one ever wanted Vietnam, and we thought we were going to.
Yeah. And it's the same thing. I mean, these are just areas of the world where you're just not going to win, and we don't really belong there. I mean, to what end does this solve us? I mean, this is probably because of the fact that Pakistan is nearby and they have a nuclear bomb. And this way, we can feel it. We can keep an eye on them. I don't know. It's a tenuous period, but I want to try to find some silver lining in this, and I do think it's there. I mean, I have great faith in democracy. I have great faith in the human condition and how we approach life and compassion. I think there's a lot of it out there. I don't think it's all this one-sided. I think we're getting a very slanted view in some regard because, like you said, the one with the megaphone is causing this bad, ugly picture to surface, and we've got to be able to maintain and fight that back. And I wonder where that will happen, and do we see the progress of history unfolding in a way that brings that to light?
I certainly hope so. I mean, something that would certainly help would be if CNN and MSNBC and devoted at least 1 hour every day to just good news stories.
Yeah.
This wonderful thing happened today.
But you know that good news does not sell. That's the problem.
Right, and then we wonder why people shoot each other. We have a culture that's violent. We condone violence. We propagate violence. We glorify violence. The fact that you can show somebody having their head blown off by a gun, but you can't show a sex scene that's all you need to know.
Yeah, you really don't need anything else. It's true. It just shows you where the priorities are. I mean, it's just totally ridiculous, and it is very
right. We've taken something that's wonderful and beautiful in a beautiful part of the human experience and made it dirty.
Mm-hmm.
And we've taken the ugliest behavior that it can conceivably be done, which is taking the life of another human being, and somehow that's okay.
Glorified it, yeah. And there seems to be, and I'm not sure who is responsible for that. I mean, who would be the arbiter of that? How would we garner this? I mean, I think that the system, in many ways, is so broken due to the process. Just the simple fact of the Electoral College alone. I mean, just that alone. You look at, and that's a numerological thing too. That's something that's right in your wheelhouse as far as how these votes are counted, and I mean, how do you parse?
Right, and it's also what's happened is I give the Republicans a lot of credit that they really learned how to game the system very well. They know that they don't even need the popular vote. They just need to win enough states. I heard something on the radio the other day that 82, what was the number now? Because every state has 2 senators.
Right.
But it's really a handful on both coasts that represent the greatest population.
Well,
and that the majority of senators represent the minority of the population when it comes to numbers.
Absolutely, because you've got small states, right? You've got small states. Like, right. Like Wyoming has as much power. That senator has as much power as somebody from New York State or California, for example.
Exactly. Now, there's a big push for a constitutional convention.
Right.
There's people out there that are pushing very, very hard to have a constitutional convention, which may or may not be a good thing. Because depending on who's pulling the levers of power with that, they could totally redo the texture and the fabric of this country in a way that we would never recover from.
It's really an interesting experiment we are going through. We are living in, interesting times. As they say, the old Chinese proverb says, may you live in interesting times. And yes, we do, and we are, and this is a time for growth and a chance to evolve into something better. But we have to be sure that we can find that. And I think that there has to be some sort of, I guess, like you said, things get worse before they get better. That may very well be what we're facing. And do you see that, I mean, numerologically, so this coming year for the United States, you said is going to be, 2018 is going to be, what would you base it on? Would you base it on the July 4th, 2018? Or would you base, yeah, you would, okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that gives us, again, that gives the United States a 22-4 universe, a personal year. And again, Trump amazingly tracks that, so he also goes into a 22-4. So with the overall 11 universal year, there's great potential for things to rise up.
Right.
And with the United States, with the 22, there's great potential for the rising up to be built on a foundation that benefits all. The problem is we have a madman who would probably never see the positive side of the 22. But again, I think that he will be gone sooner rather than later. I think he will end up just canceling himself out.
Well, I think that by this time next year, we will have had enough of this constant windbag of chortle coming out of him, or out of this whole neck of the woods, that people will turn off and look for other outlets. They'll look for other things. I think it's already reaching that place now where I know many people, yourself and myself included, don't even bother looking at the news anymore. Don't bother with it because we're just so tired. We know what it's going to say already. We know what's going to be like before we can get on there. So why bother? Why bother to be upset? It just doesn't make sense.
And again, in of itself, people disconnecting, turning off, will force media to change.
Of course it will. They'll have to get them back. I mean, it's like listening to a radio station static. You're only going to stay on that station for so long. After you get tired of listening to the static, you're going to change the channel.
Right.
And
right. Well, people also then, we have these tribes. There's the Fox tribe. There's the MSNBC tribe. Although I have to say MSNBC has certainly become more, I don't want to say middle of the road, but much more open to presenting both sides of the story.
Right. I see a much broader swing in many parts of the country and many news outlets to be balanced, just to give the sense that they're saying they're being fair, which is what they should be. I mean, you should be objective. There should be no opinion attached to a lot of this. It's okay to have commentary, but when it comes to reporting the facts, you've got to report the facts. That's where the lines have gotten blurred. So, well,
But then the problem is we have that Sinclair Broadcasting, who owns hundreds and hundreds of stations, which actually forces your local TV station to tell one good Trump story every day.
Yeah.
They actually send out a script to these people. This must be put on air the way it is written.
Yeah. No, I know. That's a very disconcerting thing. Well, before we finish up here, Michael, let's end on a positive note. My guest today has been Micheal John Fierro. His website is just that, Micheal John Fierro, Fierro is the way his last name is spelled, .com, michealjohnfierro.com. He's a numerologist. He's written books. He does sessions. He'll do individual sessions for you. I want to look at just real quickly to just summarize this, give us a little bit of, silver in the old cloud lining there, where we might be headed. Now, I feel very much the way you do, that there's a polarity, there's a duality to all things, and we have just as much potential to do good as we have to do bad. It's a matter of sort of hitting that breaking point, like you mentioned, where you've got to get to that spot where you say, okay, we've got to turn this around. I'm just curious what that looks like as you roll out the future for the next 3 to 4 years. Do you see that occurring do you see a similar pattern, or do you see what I'm seeing, which is sort of we're coming down to a collapse of some sort before we can bounce back out?
I'm kind of in concurrence with you. I believe we're going to have to collapse before anything gets any better.
Yeah, and that might mean...
now, that being said, to me, the danger there is the collapse will bring out the crazies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, people will seize that as an opportunity to, continue even worse than they are now. But I have faith in the human condition. Actually, it's more, maybe it's not faith in the human condition. I have faith in consciousness.
Yeah, I do too.
I have faith that eventually the conscious mind, the conscious part of being alive at this time in this dimension will come more greatly to the surface. And the rising tide will lift all boats, and we will get beyond this. But I also see some dark years in front of us until we get to that point.
Right.
I would think that at least till 2020, unless there's a dramatic shift in with the elections next year. Now, if there's a dramatic shift with the elections next year, then we could speed this along. But again, voting the same people in, it's the definition of insanity. You keep doing the same thing, expecting different results.
That's true. Couldn't have been said better. That's exactly about how way I feel, too. I think we're at that point. Anyway, you've been listening to Turning of the Wheel. My guest today is Micheal John Fierro. His website is Micheal John Fierro, Fierro.com. Numerology and interesting commentary. I encourage you to check him out. He's also on Facebook as well. So, Micheal, thanks so much for coming on today. Always great to talk to you. I know this subject is a heavy one, but it's no harm in talking about it. I think each of us has to hold some responsibility for making this a little bit better. So I appreciate you coming on today.
And we can't ignore it, and we can't pretend that it's not happening.
Right. So we got to talk about the elephant in the room, and the elephant is in the room. So
that's right.
Anyway, thanks, Micheal, and take care.
My pleasure, always.
You've been listening to Turning of the Wheel with your host, Chris Flisher. To schedule a reading with me or to order artwork, you may visit my website at www.turningofthewheel.com. That's www.turningofthewheel.com. Or you can call me at 978-393-1036. Thank you. And as always, be open to possibilities.